Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Friday, December 29th, as we pass the fifth birthday of In the Money Media and get into the next year, officially speaking or unofficially speaking, before the calendar turns. If you're watching along on YouTube, let us know what you got for Christmas. Let us know how those holidays were and how the betting's been going at this festive time of year. I'm your host, Peter Thomas, Fornatown, not too far from the Brooklyn Bunker, but actually out on Port Washington in Long Island, not too far from Belmont Park in my dad's old office. All those records that you see behind me when I'm sitting in Brooklyn, they used to be over here, wall to wall, floor to ceiling on the side wall. These days, it's more of I don't know what it is. It's just there's lots of pretty pictures of Italy and some horses lying around. But anyway, good vibes. I always enjoy broadcasting from here, and I always enjoy broadcasting with the man I will introduce now, coming to you from a place where there's a rumor that I may make my debut appearance in just a couple of months' time. That's Houston, Texas, and the man is Nick Tammaro. Nick, what's going on?
Doing great, Pete. Hope we have you down here. In fact, I wore the HOU hat just to remind you. And there's a lot of this is a city you'd really enjoy. It's the culinary and cultural capital of the South.
I love it.
We'd love to have you. And good to be with you now post Christmas, pre New Year's, but ready to get the rest of the year kind of finished up with and get started again.
What did you get for Christmas? I always, horse players always get some, there's usually that one interesting gift that pertains to our pastime, whether it's, some new 3-ring binders in the old days or like a fine pair of binoculars. That would be another old days one. These days, it tends to be a little bit more virtual. You get anything cool?
I don't let my binoculars get too far away. So they're right here. I got some stuff that I could use in the booth, which will be helpful coming up starting next week. Hopefully I don't sound so raspy by then. Maybe I'll let this run its course. I feel fine, which is weird, but nothing terribly big. I got a new lunch bag, which I needed. So that's come in very handy for all the activities.
What about your daughter? Of course, that's the most interesting stuff. What the kids?
So she's loaded up. She got a bicycle. She got a new Bluey house toy. She got dinosaur eggs. She got a new magic wand. So yeah,
nice. Locked and loaded.
We did Disney movie marathon last night as well. So
fantastic. What was the featured presentation?
Lilo and Stitch. So we went from Elemental to Lilo and Stitch to Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, that's good. That's a good
trio.
Perrin got speaking of the dinosaur egg stuff, she got this fun excavation kit. She got very, very serious about it. She had all her tools. She was chiseling away at the clay and came up with some fun trinkets. She was very, very happy. And then the big gift this year, she's gotten into theater, specifically Shakespeare. And we're going to do a wonderful school schedule this year where for the first time in my memory, and I think the first time ever, her school ends pre-Ascot. So we're going to actually be able to have the family over. And then as a gift, we're going to do a little side trip over to Stratford-upon-Avon one day to do all the Shakespeare house stuff. So it's a very Merry Christmas around these parts. And for me, my favorite gift might be this jacket that I'm wearing. I like this little racing stripe situation. So let's get into the meat of why we're here. As much fun as it is to look back at the holidays, we're going to look ahead to a Saturday at Santa Anita where we're hearing weather might be in the game. Nick, is that what you saw?
Yeah, as of this morning, there's a forecast for about a 1/4 inch of rain, and hopefully that won't end up being quite as serious. But yeah, I almost wonder if the racing office was trying to beat the rain by putting the 2 turf stakes early on in the card, and maybe the forecast shifted a little bit since that was done. I'm going to look up the National Weather Service, which I think at times is a little bit more reliable. They're saying rain, chance of precipitation 80%, new precipitation between 1/10 and 1/4. So nothing too crazy. I think that if that's what it ends up being, I could see the Joe Hernandez, which is the first, going at 6.5 on the straightaway rather than down the hill.
Right. They are very hesitant, even with a drop of water, to run on the downhill. So but maybe you're right. Maybe it'll be as simple as that. It's a heck of a curtain jerker as it were. 3 o'clock Eastern, the post time for this Joe Hernandez grade 2 action, scheduled for down the hill, but double check. My angle has a little bit to do with down the hill on this one, but we got this full field of 12 going postward. We'll let you kick this one off, Nick.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing any angles. I thought this was really, really tough. I ended up picking Lovesick Blues, who I don't love the jockey change to Tyler Bates from Umberto Rispoli. All due respect to Tyler, and Rispoli is one of the better turf jockeys in the colony. This horse was compromised last time by a traffic-laden trip. It was a weaker field, no doubt about it. I think the race and his past performance lines that you're looking at to try and say, hey, if he runs that, he can win, is the Daytona from last year, where he got a big pace to run into. He put forth a really nice effort, and he's run credibly sprinting on the turf now multiple times. So I was willing to give him the nod at what should be a relatively decent price. I think he'll go up off this 6-1 morning line too. That felt a little low, and it feels as if this race is extremely contentious on paper. You know, the interesting horse in here, Pete, to me is the 5 Peaceful Waters. And I don't know how much you dug into this pedigree, but the second dam of this horse was the inaugural Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf winner, Soaring Softly. So this is a big dam side for turf. There are 3 turf winners in the first family. And John Sadler, first-time turf, non-maidens over the last 5 years, 19%, 342 ROI. ROI is bolstered a lot by 129 to 1 winner. That's 4 winners overall. So point being, this is a barn, obviously, that's prolific in general, but one that can have a horse ready to make the surface switch. He also figures to get a pretty good trip right outside of Forbidden Kingdom. So I picked at 7, 5, 10. I could make a case for Lucky Score down on the rail. I could also hear cases on Turn on the Jets and Olympic Runner. It's a pretty wide open race.
There's a lot to dig into. I did see that with Peaceful Waters. For some reason, I was envisioning him more hooking up with Forbidden Kingdom and maybe giving this race a much needed injection of pace. So I wanted to go in another direction. And the horse I was envisioning tripping out behind those 2 is one that you mentioned, and that's the number 10, Turn on the Jets. And then my angle on this horse was just doing the full pedigree dig through. Sometimes when it's a horse doing something they haven't done in a while, in this case, the downhill, I'll go back and look not just at the raw figures or the results when they did the thing the previous time, in this case, again, going down the hill back, which year was that? It went back in 2022 when this horse first went down the downhill. I just noted the fact that the figures were virtually the same as the figures running in the flatter turf configurations. So with that in mind, looking at how this horse has gotten faster now as a late season 4-year-old, I was thinking those downhill numbers are going to improve similarly, and that would make this horse a major contender in this spot. And I think 5-1 is, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's probably accurate in such a competitive race where there's so much else going on. So I kind of like Turn on the Jets in here. I definitely like Peaceful Waters as well. Forbidden Kingdom for me is just one who I'm going to let beat me here because I do think is going to be compromised. Whether or not he's loose early, I think Peaceful Waters is going to really spy on this runner, and he's a very cool horse. This was a horse that a man on these airwaves, not either of us, once said would win the Triple Crown. That's how well he thought of he was back in the day. That didn't work out, but he's just always a horse who takes a little bit more cash than he should. So for me, from a wagering point of view, the approach might be trying to beat him. Don't necessarily trust some of the other lower ones at the odds spectrum. I feel like we've identified the 3 most interesting horses here in the 7, the 5, and the 10.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little concerned. I do like your confidence in your angle. I do think Turn on the Jets is probably a little bit better at 5 or 5.5. Probably better with a compact type run. But the good thing about this type of race, with it being honestly run, is that he could probably settle a few lengths off of it, as you're saying, and then make that one bid from the quarter pole home. It's also worth noting that we've only seen one day of racing at Santa Anita during the classic meet, which started on Tuesday, and it was advantageous to be forward on the turf. No doubt about it. It was very hard to make up an appreciable amount of ground. So you at least want to keep that in mind when you're looking at Friday's card, where you should be betting Mo Fox Given in race number 5, who will be coming from off the pace, but is also going to win. And keep that in mind on Saturday as well.
Well, that's good stuff. Let's go to race number 3, the other graded stake here. This one at a mile and an eighth. You'd like to think we'll stay on with that tiny amount of rain we're going to get. The grade 3 Frankel for these fillies and mares. Field is 6 going postward. And I didn't have anything too strong. I mean, my original short list was the 3 obvious horses, 1, 5, and 6. The more I looked, though, the more I wanted to grade them and maybe even take a little bit of a shot against Oakhurst, just based on the absolute lack of early speed there. You're one there, the 6. I think if there's any kind of pace on, this horse has the ability, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think to quicken a little bit more than a runner like Oakhurst. And I could see there being enough pace for this one to get going and see things out at the mile and the eighth based on pedigree and just form wise. That handicap run at Ascot just really, to me, looks good enough to win a grade 3 race in California. Lakota Spirit, the one runner I thought would probably get the best trip, sitting in behind the presumptive early pace of the 3 and or 4. And I wanted that one, maybe try to mess around and exact as 1 and 6, 6 and 1, and figure Oakhurst will be a belated third in the spot. Who knows? Pratt rides so well. He may have other ideas and get her in the mix. And it's not like I hate her in this spot, but I was just trying to come up with something other than giving you the 3 favorites in a 6-horse field. How do you see the Frankel?
Yeah, I don't have anything much to add to that in terms of anything clever at all. I picked Oakhurst. So, my thought on Oakhurst was that while she has been a little underwhelming in recent starts, I mean, she's just been facing significantly better horses than these.
Yes.
Your one there is the one that is the variable. Lakota Spirit's coming out of one other thens. I think it's notable that Lakota Spirit has improved as much as she has for Phil D'Amato. Obviously, facing softer competition has definitely helped, but and she has a big tactical edge. I'm hoping that Pratt gets Oakhurst into a spot, 3-4 lengths off of it, and that she'll just outkick them from there. But not a race that I'm really chomping at the bit to be betting. We'll see how much ground both Oakhurst and your one there have to make up, because I tried to even make some of the other horses in here that might be forward, including Angel Natashiko, but they're just not good enough at all.
That's
so,
kind of
it looks like it should be the 1, 5, or 6, and really, when push comes to shove, it should be the 5 or 6.
If it becomes a rider's race, that's no offense at all to Hernandez, but you figure Pratt and Rispoli are gonna,
they're better.
That little bit of an advantage, exactly. That could tell. Yeah, but there's a good point about the training job by D'Amato on Lakota Spirit. It isn't often you see one leave the barn of Chad Brown and get faster. Now, maybe some of that is just her going from being in the Brown barn, mostly a 3-year-old, to being a late season 4-year-old, but it's still, you don't see it often. So it is notable. We'll see how that one shakes out as we skip ahead. What should we do? Why don't we do the pick 5, which will send us ahead to race number 5, where we've got 2-year-old Calbred fillies, maiden special weights, going a mile on a turf. Another short field here. You talked about speed being advantageous on the turf. Well, if that's the case, isn't the funnily named Lamborghini going to take a lot of beating in the spot? You have anything more clever than that?
Yeah, you would imagine so. I ended up picking her second behind the 2 Quick Kate, figuring that Quick Kate with a better break from the gate, stretching out in distance, would probably have more speed. And she ran pretty well on debut. That was a race otherwise where the pace held together. The pace usually holds together at 5/8. And but this filly made up serious ground. She was bet down to 5-2 as well. So there was an expectation she was going to run well, and she did. So I would imagine that with more ground, she'll have no trouble. So yeah, it seemed pretty simple to me. The 2 and 3, the 6 OK Rose is going to get some money for Peter Urton, with Flavian Pratt getting on board, and she did run well last time out, went third behind Lamborghini. I would see her definitely as a second tier type of runner for me, at least in the pick 5. I'd probably just use the 2 and 3, and I don't particularly like the horse, but I do like the name of the 4, Be a Goldfish, of course, a nod to Ted Lasso fame.
Yes,
which never a bad idea to remind yourself to be a goldfish.
Those short memories help horse players as much as they help footballers. And that's a good point about Quick Kate, an angle that I always talk about. When they're bet hard first up, that's usually a proxy for them having early speed. And then when they don't break first up, a lot of times that's not, they're going to be a habitual bad breaker. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it was an unfamiliar thing, and they're going to break a lot better second time out and show a lot more speed. And if that's the case, For a horse called Quick Kate that was bet hard first out, yeah, you can probably bet she's going to outperform that pace map. I'm going to be including her in my reckoning of the race as well. Race number 6, we've got a short field of 5 for the starter allowance, going a mile on the dirt this time around. And a little bit tricky. I want to come up with a pace angle. Timeform says it's going to be one that favors horses that are going to be on or near. But the two obvious horses to me are going to be vying for that favoritism, and I'm not sure which one to pick. How did you come up with a winner for race number 6, and who is it?
Yeah, I'm not completely convinced that a mile is what he wants, but the race that the 3 Hondo Crouch ran last time out sort of indicates that he's probably just better than what he's running into today. That was a good performance all in all. He was wide going to the turn. He broke from the far outside. And Del Mar is generally an outside stalking track. It's
Yep.
usually advantageous to be in the 3-4 path. That's kind of the lightning lane over the last couple of years on the dirt. And he was down on the rail for much of the middle, like 4 or 5 furlongs of this race. And then Frezu angled him out at the top of the stretch and he started running a little bit. That was also a race, I think, that was better in terms of depth from top to bottom. Additionally, I mean, Mark Glad had a really bad summer Del Mar meet, had a really good Santa Anita fall meet, and now started on the 26th with 3 wins.
Yep.
So it feels like his runners will probably be in really, really good form to start the meet. Bendetti Joe and Del Mar Jerry are the other horses. Del Mar Jerry, I'm not completely convinced is a dirt horse. And Bendetti Joe is going to have to run better to beat Hondo Crouch. So it felt like if Hondo Crouch is ridden aggressively out of the gate, he's probably going to get to the front. He'll probably be pretty tough to beat from there because there's just not a lot of speed in here with it being such a compact field.
And Frezu's capable of that ride for sure.
Very much
He's a little bit of an in and outer from the day. I don't follow like absolutely every race day in, day out, Santa, the way that I once did, or the way that you or Dean Kepler do. But, I think Fraser's capable of giving this one the right kind of ride, and coupled with the Glatt hot barn factor feels like the one that I want the most. And yeah, I guess the closest thing I'd have to an opinion in terms of the late picks would be I would be willing to play out Del Mar Jerry and just lose if that one were to win. As much as I love those connections, I just think it's a tricky spot in a race with no pace. And then the other positive on Hondo just feels like one who's been against the flow, and then this time around should be decidedly with the flow. Race number 7, we proceed to. This is 2-year-old maiden claimers going 5.5 on the dirt. Race where Timeform has the 11 runner Sunset Storm loose. That always makes me take another look. All-time hunch horse for me, based on my grandfather who worked for Seagram's, and one of his brands was Chivas Regal. I always give Mr. Chivas an extra look. That one pretty exposed, but only a second time gelding in this spot. Very curious to hear from a proper handicapping point of view, Nick, who you came up with in here.
With that lead in, I wasn't sure if you were going to Mr. Chivas or Let the Liquor Talk. So
that's your exact.
It might be the right exacta, right? No, I like Let the Liquor Talk, who's a second-time starter for Jeff Mullins. Didn't take any money on debut against 50 maiden claimers, but actually ran a better race than it looks on paper. Didn't get out of the gate all that great. Ended up rushing up along the inside, chased on the rail really much of the way. Understandably tired late. Gets a little drop in class here, staying in the open 32s. And just projecting that this horse runs better with some experience, you would think that would happen. It usually does. Mullins has solid numbers with second-time starters. The problem with Mullins is he's a guy whose horses generally are over bets. You're not going to find a lot of positive ROI stats. But I do think this is a horse that looks pretty formidable. I thought the 8 Sharp Lorenzo was interesting enough for Lorenzo Campesano. It was a barn, small-time barn, based at Los Al. Has the majority of his horses run at Los Al, but has had some success in Southern California throughout the circuit. This is a horse who ran last against maiden special weight runners, now in for a tag, just sort of an obvious drop. Feels like one that could run better after showing at least a little bit of life last time out. The 11 Sunset Storm is first off a claim by Val Brinkerhoff. This is a barn that is solid, and 30% first off the claim on the dirt, positive ROI there. So a little bit of an angle for a horse that went off 7-5 in an 8-horse race and took a lot of money, obviously, showed a lot of speed as well. So we'll see if he can run back to that. And the 4 Smiling Jojo had a lot of speed last time out, ended up opening up a pretty clear lead before tiring. So it feels like a race where good thing is that Hondo Crouch and in the 5th will probably only end up being too deep. You're probably going to have to go 4 or 5 deep here in order to really get all your bases covered.
9, 8, 11, and 4 were the numbers I wrote down.
And I'd throw in the 1 as a backup as well.
And then, and I wrote down 11 and 1, but I'm with you. And I'm probably even in my official picks going to go ahead and put the 9 and the 8 in there. I think we'll spread similarly and see if we can't survive and advance. As Nick points out, when you can get so skinny in the other legs, that becomes a viable strategy. And there's just a lot more questions than answers when you're delving into the form of race number 7. Race number 8 brings us back on the turf, going a mile, maiden, Calbreds, field of 8. Who do you like in here?
Well, I mean, what you want to do is find a way to bet against the 5 Ghostly Act, right? Who's now 0 for 10, 5 second place finishes, looked to have dead aim last time out and came up wanting undoubtedly the horse to beat. But from a betting perspective, you have to look for alternatives. And the alternative to me clearly was the 2 Antibes. Now, you will laugh when I, of course, bring up why Antibes makes me laugh. And there's a line in the first season of The Sopranos when Dr. Melfi refers to Green Grove as a resort at Cap d'Antibes. And so Tony tries to repeat that to his mother and says, it's like a resort at Captain Teebs. And she says, what's that? He says, it's some rich guy who has a chain of hotels. So Antibes is the one that I ended up siding with, and not just because of his name, but look, he was stretched out in distance last time out. I actually picked him that day too, and it was not Giovanni Franco's finest work. He wrestled with this horse for the first half mile of the race. He wanted to be forward. He ended up wrangling him back to 8th, and I mean, he just gave up precious ground. And these Southern California turf courses, they do this in New York constantly, but you can wrangle your horse back in New York and still win. It's awfully hard to do it over there, right? Yep. It's usually a quicker race. It's a tighter turn course. It's unforgiving if you're trying to make up significant ground. So I didn't like the trip this horse got. I think he'll get a better one with Juan Hernandez from the inside, and I'm really expecting them to show more speed. I think if that's the case, this horse could be very dangerous. So Antibes was one that I wanted to really try at 4 to 1 or so. And the other horse that I'll use as an A is the 8B Punctual, who comes back off a layoff, last seen against Stakes Company, 2 turf races prior to that, both good enough. If Ghostly Act wins, I lose.
I'm so with you on this. It's starting with Antibes. If it had been a seaside resort in Italy instead of France, I think he would have gotten the reference. I'd like to think that anyway. Though I guess maybe at that point in the storyline, he hadn't been to the old country. But that's a tangent for another time. But yeah, this horse just makes sense, comparatively unexposed, and it's just one of my favorite old school form angles. I mean, yeah, he was beaten pretty soundly by Ghostly Act. But for those 4 lengths, when you factor in the trip and then you factor in, I mean, Ghostly Act ain't going to be 5 to 2, right? Isn't this a horse they could go nuts for and bet into 6 to 5? And just feels like one that, I'll take the price and the trip for the difference between 6 to 5 and 5 to 1 for Antibes. But the other one you mentioned is the one that I like the best, Be Punctual, because this horse just has races good enough to win. And I like the fact, I like the pace map for this horse. I like the idea of one that's shown an ample amount of finish for this level, or certainly running on through the lane for this level, that this time around is just going to be so much closer to the pace. So I feel like Be Punctual and Antibes are the right plays. Hopefully we're not being too clever here. We can beat this Ghostly Act and potentially be in business. It's not like Ghostly Act can't win, I think it's just a poor wagering proposition. Is that right? Or do you hate Ghostly Act more than, do you have like a real form reason to say the horse can't win, or is it just a value concern for you?
Yeah, just a value concern. No, this horse absolutely can win. I mean, and if you're of that persuasion, then use. But one that I don't think you're getting any value using this horse. I do expect him to go down quite a bit off the morning line. So just one that I want to try and beat to create a little value.
We go back to the dirt for 12,000 claimers. Some real bread and butter stuff in race number 9. But with that, we also get a big full field of 12 showing up to the party here. Nick, who's your idea of the winner, and what will your approach be in the late pick 5?
Yeah, interesting race, big field, and if it stays intact, I mean, they really should move on the front end, which I think will help the 9 Big Splash, who I ended up picking. This is a horse who came back last time out at Los Al going 1,000 yards. Really walked out of the gate, and it looked as if the jockey was instructed to just get this horse around there. And
Mhm.
he ended up angling him in coming off the turn. He got third. They didn't really persevere with him on the gallop out. It was just simply a leg stretcher. It almost felt like, this is going to be as good as 3 workouts. So I'm hoping that he can run back to that good race from Santa Anita in June. I know he was with Milton Pineda back then. Milton Pineda is a trainer who's not in the game anymore. So there's a little bit of a shadow over that. However, I do think pace wise, he sets up very well. Also worth noting, this is for everybody in general, but thoroughgraphs are free this week. And this is their annual giveaway during the stretch between Christmas and New Year's. These are the kind of races I think the thoroughgraphs are great for, because you
Yes.
really can narrow down some of the differences between them. And his best sheet numbers really fit very well with everybody else in here. I thought the other horse that you had to at least pay some serious attention to was the 6 Buck Owens, who shortens up now from a mile. 2 back ran very well at this 3 life level, missing by a nose at Del Mar behind a repeat winner. I picked at 9, 6, 12. I'll use every bit of the 3 of them. I'll probably use the 10 and 11 as well in some capacity, more than likely more so as backups. But I'm going to play this thing for a big pace. And if so, then I think the winner ends up either being the 9 or 6.
You mentioned the one that I was interested in, the 11 Magnificent Ride. Comes here off a wire win in a slow pace, but I just like the fact that the horse upline that day was going faster later. A lot of times when you see that, especially with a horse who was just coming off the bench, they can be more tractable than that. And I was just envisioning maybe, just maybe, a perfect trip for Magnificent Ride. First time against winners in the 14th start. That ain't easy, but this might be the kind of group, and this horse might get the kind of trip where that's okay. Suppose if Fresu has a good day, I'm going to have a good day. The 6 Buck Owens was another one I thought just seemed like an obvious one to potentially benefit in terms of the dropping class and the way that the pace was going to shake out. I did have another question for you about the horse coming out of the mixed breed race. Who's the number 9, Big Splash. Well, I looked at it, ultimately did not commit to. I will probably now throw in on your say so, but just generally speaking, those mixed breed races, how do you evaluate them? I mean, I thought you made a great point about this one, that race being used as a prep off the layoff, and we've heard so many horsemen say, usually about first time starters, but it works off the layoff too, that a race can be worth 3 workouts. But generally speaking, how do those mixed breed Los Al races class up with these lower level claimers at Santa Anita?
I mean, usually what I'll do is look at the running lines of the horses that were in there and see where they fit. And Hey Batman and So I'm Told, who were the 1-2 finishers that day, they're horses that have been getting mid to upper 60 buyers. So it seemed like it was pretty consistent with this. It was an allowance race, obviously. So you would think, at least on paper, it was a little bit better. Those class lines kind of blur. But I think effectively most of those are just 12-5 to 16 3 life claimers, just the same as they would be at the bigger tracks. But I do think it's important to look at some of those horses' past performances
Yeah.
with a tool like Formulator to try and get a sense of it, because I do think you're going to have occasions where they are significantly weaker. I also know that at 1,000 yards, it's nearly impossible to make up 10 lengths. So I think that's part of the reason why Big Splash wasn't persevered with. Now, look, I don't love that he was coming back from a layoff and walked out of the gate. It's not a great sign. And usually horses that are in good form do break. But with that said, I think he probably needed the race, and I'm expecting improvement.
Double-digit long shot, man. It's one of those things where
Right.
those factors, like you said, where you can sort of conjure a case that there's some way in which the horse might be done well. It's 12 claimer. Like a lot of them could be done. That's a great reason to bet against a favorite, but not
Right.
a good reason to throw out a long shot. So I'm absolutely with you on that. Nick, this was really fun. We're going to be having you back hopefully more. Lately, it's been like either you or me on the late week show. Hopefully, we can do this a lot more in the early part, and hopefully throughout 2024, we get to talk about these races together, because I like to think we, hopefully give out some winners, but we're also talking a little bit more generally about some of these angles that can help people going forward in their handicapping. Again, if you're listening on YouTube, chime in. make a comment with whatever you want. I am interested in what you got for Christmas. I'm also interested in which leg you want to narrow down in, or which race is your favorite to bet at Santa Anita on Saturday. I want to get a little better this year. One of my New Year's resolutions. Let's interact in the comments a little bit more and, continue to foster this sense of community that we have. Nick, appreciate you. Look forward to hearing you behind the mic at Sam Houston soon, and we'll be talking.
Sounds great, my friend. Thanks so much. Happy New Year.